Hi, today's episode, we're going to talk about phishing. And joining me is Anthony from our human support team who handles all kinds of funky, gnarly, wild phishing and such a gooey stuff, all kinds of craziness that's going on in the email world. Anthony, thank you so much for joining.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. And, so let's get right to it. What in the world is phishing? And it's PH, right? Not it's PH in a bad
Yeah,
way.
yeah, pH in a bad way. It's all off balance. Um, so, phishing essentially is someone maliciously sending you an email going after something. That's kind of where the term comes from. They're throwing out something and they're going to see if they can hook you and pull something in. Basically, it covers a couple ranges of different things people are after, but typically these people are after one of two things. They
Mhm.
either want your email credentials so that you can be used, your account can be used as another cog in their phishing machine, or the good stuff, they want you to send them some money.
Mm.
um, those are really the two types of phishing that people will see, is people trying to get their email credentials or get them to make a financial transaction.
And they'll actually look like someone that you know, right? That's kind of like the scarier part of it.
Yes, yeah. So that's a technique called spoofing,
Hmm.
and there's a few variations on that. The simplest one and the most common one is they'll make an account on Hotmail or whatever, and it'll be anything, the actual address, but they'll set their name as a name
Hmm.
like a boss or a CEO or a friend or something, or they might make it look like a account of a vendor. So they might make an account that's like Microsoft at hotmail.com, but it'll be spelled kind of weird. And if you just glance, you'll be like, oh, that's Microsoft.
Mhm.
Um, so that's a technique called spoofing, and that's usually what it does. Now, sometimes they can be extra tricky, and it will look like it's actually coming from that person's email address, your boss's email, your coworker's email. That's kind of a higher level of spoofing, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. It's not actually their address.
What would that actually look like? So just so I understand the difference
Mhm.
between kind of, it seems like if I saw a Hotmail account, I'd be like, "Wait, that's a little odd."
Yeah,
Like
that that
people can
that
actually
one.
look like it.
Yeah, those are kind of the easier ones to spot. The other ones, it just taking a cursory look at who the email is from, you can't really tell. So that's where you need to be a little bit more vigilant, looking at things like the content of the actual message, what you're being asked for, and just kind of paying attention to the wording of things, because 99% of these are sent by people who English is not their first language. So there's
Hmm.
a lot of just like odd grammar and stuff. That's usually a pretty big tip off that something's out of place. Um, so it's really just about, being vigilant about the content of the emails you're reading and reacting to.
Now, when you discuss it, it sounds like something that most people would be like, "Oh, I would never click on this or accept this message." However, is it because there's a sense of urgency that they use that they create, or I guess what I'm trying to understand is from your experience, how do people get
Mhm.
fooled?
Yeah, well, it's these guys do a lot of legwork.
Hmm.
So they'll like in the example where they're trying to make it look like a coworker, um, you know, they can go and collect a lot of information that's freely out there. They can go on your company site and they're going to find out the CEO's name and his email address, and they're going to find out the person who does accounting, the controller, someone with access to money stuff. They're going to find your name and your email address on the company website or on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Um, it's they just need to put a little bit of legwork in. A lot of this information is out there, so it's quick to see, okay, well, this is coming to me and I'm the money person and it's coming from the CEO, and it's just a short to the point message that says I need you to process a payment. um, if you're in a busy day or something, it's easy to just see that and roll with it, like, on the surface everything looks above board.
Right.
So they put a lot of legwork into it. That's one method of sort of getting people to fall for this. The other method is creating these elaborate hoax login pages. They may, for example, send you an email where they're masquerading as Microsoft, and they'll say, oh, your email's been compromised. Click here and log in and we'll reactivate it. And it directs you to a malicious site where the login looks completely identical to your usual mail login.
Mm.
So again, if you're just taking a quick, you see, oh, my email's locked, I need to get this fixed quick, and the site looks the same. Again, if you're just looking on the surface, everything looks to be above board. So you put in your credentials and you don't think of anything of it. Your email keeps working. It never actually stops. So you're like, oh, I guess that was fine. Or they'll send something like a Dropbox link or a DocuSign link. And it's maybe a client or something like that. And they're saying, hey, I want you to review this paperwork. And again, you click the link and it looks like a DocuSign page or a Dropbox page, but it's asking for something a little bit different. It's asking you to put in email credentials.
Mm.
Um, so a lot of legwork goes into making these spoof pages. It's frustrating they don't put their powers to good use, their powers and time to good use, but this is what they go for. And let me pull up.
If it's okay, I wanted to take it back a little bit. Just there was the first two examples in particular
Mhm.
were the first is, if let's say a CEO, you get a message from her, it blasts out, and either you're an accountant or maybe you're just someone on the staff that communicates with the CEO or doesn't, and you see
Right,
a message from her, you're like, oh man, I better act on this now or
right,
I'm going to be in trouble. And so
right.
what would that message have, like what is the action for that person, that the recipient, to do? Is it like, is there a file, a link, or how does it typically work?
So typically with those, what they'll do is they'll either ask you to buy gift cards, most often iTunes gift cards. They'll
Okay.
say, hey, I need you to buy $500 iTunes gift cards and send me the codes on the back of them. Or they'll say, hey, here's an account to do a wire transfer, and do it by, as soon as possible. So those are the first two. And, especially with that gift cards thing, like I can't imagine that's too common of an ask of anybody. So
Mm.
again, you just need to be really conscious of the content of the message you're getting. Like, why would this person ask me to go buy gift cards?
Mm.
Or why does their wording seem strange or clunky? Their sentences, it just doesn't sound like them, or their signature doesn't look right. So that's where you just need to, like, anytime you get an email where you're being asked to make a financial transaction like that, you just need to kind of take a minute to read it and be like, am I sure? Um, and there's one foolproof way to be absolutely sure you're not doing something wrong, and that's to call the person who allegedly sent it to you. Uh,
Right.
so that's sort of the magic bullet, unfortunately, is to just pick up the phone and go, hey, did you want me to buy $5,000 worth of Chili's gift cards for some reason? That's kind of the magic bullet. Now, of course, obviously, if being sent purportedly by your CEO or something, they're not always available. But just take a beat, and it's worth to at least even just send them an email directly. Don't even reply to what you got if it looks odd. Just send them an email directly, or reach out to their assistant or something and just say, hey, I got this message and this seemed a little strange, and I just wanted to confirm before we sent company money out for something like this. Because I've promised, like, 99% of the time it'll be okay that you waited to make sure that something was okay, rather than sending a few $1,000s of company money often to the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think even though it is a little bit, I could see the person being a little reluctant to wanting to pick up the phone
Certainly,
because of, the last thing you want to do is look silly.
certainly.
But hey, if it's any kind of dollars being passed, I think potentially looking a little silly versus potentially doling out some company cash.
Hmm.
I think there's a certain weight to
Hmm.
the silliness factor there.
Yes, I completely agree. And again, this isn't like, your day-to-day functions involving money.
Right.
These are very odd circumstances. Like, nobody's typically getting these kind of requests sent in an email in this fashion, to just do a wire transfer or just buy some gift cards. So
Mm.
um, it shouldn't come up enough where you'll get on anybody's nerves too much. I think it'll outweigh looking silly to just be sure on these couple of odd instances.
Now, and before we go into the way that phishing looks for let's say, vendors.
Hmm.
The last thing I wanted to touch on was what like the actual ways that people like the some of the indicators in the message beyond just requesting money. Do you ever see attachments or what I guess the other part of it too is this will go out essentially to the whole staff and they only need one person to make the mistake, right?
Right, one person who has access to the piggy bank pretty
Right.
much is all that needs to make the mistake. Usually, it'll be a little bit more targeted. They'll email each person individually because the more people they email, if you
Yeah.
send in a request for money to 15 people, you'd be like, why is George on this? He
Yeah.
doesn't do anything with finances. So it'll usually just be a one-to-one email to kind of minimize how many people can get wise to them.
Okay.
Um, but as far as what it looks like, um, really, again, it's that initial email is almost always just some text, and it just says, "Hey, I need you to do this. Can you do it?" They're kind of putting out a feeler to see if you've got someone on the line.
Gotcha.
That's the bobber of their phishing attempt. Um,
So just
they'll
replying to the message is really the first way the action occurs in many cases.
Exactly. Yeah. Just replying to the email kind of gives them like, oh, okay, I got one here. Time to continue, pursuing this. Um,
Now, if I was to receive a message from someone like that, is this still phishing? Like, if I receive a message and let's say there's a PDF attachment,
mhm.
and I'm like, this is a little weird, but let me just click on this PDF to see what's going on. Could this initiate something else entirely?
So typically with an add-in like PDF with phishing, it'll usually just be a PDF that has a link to click, and then it'll take you to some website where it'll ask you to put in your credentials.
Okay.
Um, There also may sometimes be like Microsoft Office documents, Word files, or Excel files that can have macros on them, which is just this little programming language that's used within Microsoft Office or Microsoft Excel, and that again can direct you to a malicious website. Um, so attachments can be used and often are, especially for masquerading as a vendor or making a malicious link look like something like a Dropbox link or a Google Drive link. So those would be used a lot of the time, but it's rare that something would get through where like you click it and it puts a virus on your computer and you no longer have control of your computer.
Okay.
That's pretty rare with modern business spam filtering and stuff, and modern antivirus. So that's pretty rare. That really doesn't happen too much. Again, it's really about like the social engineering and tricking you into giving them what they want.
Interesting. All right, now let's jump into the next one, which you were talking about, which is it might look like as simple as, hey, were you trying to access your account? It got locked out. Do you need to change your password or something of
Hmm.
that nature? And you said
Hmm.
it could look like Microsoft. It could look like any type of vendor that you might utilize.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've got an example right here. I'm gonna pull up just to give a
Oh,
little
awesome.
visual here.
I hope you're enjoying the show. We'd love to get to know you. We help creative companies get work done by delivering a simple, strategic, and human IT experience. If you'd like to talk to one of us, go to ripplit.com/sign me up. We'd love to get to know you more. Thank you, and back to the show.
All right. So what I'm showing here is an example where a phisher will try to masquerade as a vendor. In this case, your email provider. So you can see looking at this email, it looks very similar to a Microsoft email,
Yeah.
down to the layout, the font, the text, the color scheme. This looks very similar to a Microsoft auto-generated message.
Yeah.
So it'd be easy to see this and say, okay, let me go ahead and click and sign in, um, and make sure everything's safe with my account. And when you do click this button, the review recent activity down at the bottom, it's
Hmm.
going to take you to a login page that looks just like your usual Microsoft login or very similar. Uh,
Wow.
but it's not actually going to. So when you see this and you see, oh, my account's breached, it's easy to just kind of want to jump to action, uh,
Hmm.
of course. But there's a couple of tip offs for this.
Okay.
So the first is that Microsoft will pretty much never email you directly. Um, I know some email providers will say suspicious activity or new login. In particular, Google Apps will do that.
Hmm.
Will tell you there's been a new device login, but Microsoft never does.
Hmm.
Anything like this will come to your administrator. So if you get an email from Microsoft saying something's wrong with your email or your computer or something, 99.9% of the time it is going to be a scam email. Not legitimate, just a phishing attempt to get you to put in your email credentials.
So this stuff would go only to your admin. So your whoever's providing you IT support,
Mhm.
that's who would get the message, not
Yeah, not you. So anytime you get a message about, your account being breached or sign-in activity, anything like that, it's always a good idea to take pause because you really shouldn't get those.
you.
Uh,
Hmm.
so that's sort of the first tip off that something's out of place. You shouldn't be getting these kind of messages.
Sure.
So the second one is if you look up at the top, it says Microsoft Team as the sender, but then you see it's at Outlook.com.
Hmm.
Now, Microsoft owns Outlook, so it'd be kind of easy to think, well, maybe that's them, but anything that's coming from Microsoft will say at Microsoft.com.
Right.
You have to keep in mind anytime you see a domain like at Outlook.com or at Gmail.com, anything that you can just publicly sign up for and create an account. Nothing official is going to come through that kind of account.
Mm.
So that's again where you need to be vigilant of checking who the message is actually coming from.
Out of
Um,
curiosity, let's say someone just forgets their brain for a moment and does
mhm.
click on the link. Are you pretty much out of luck at this moment, or is there still an opportunity to kind of back away?
No. So when you pull that link up, it's going to bring you to a sign-in page where
Yeah.
it's going to ask you to put in your email address and password.
Yeah.
That is always somewhere you should take a hard stop.
Okay.
They have nothing until you type it in and hit enter, and then they've got everything.
Right.
Um, there's nothing you should ever need to put your email address and your email password into outside of actually viewing your email. So something like an Outlook application or a bookmark you have saved to check your email online or in your phone when you're setting up your email.
Mm.
No other application, be it Dropbox, DocuSign, anything like that, will prompt you to put in those credentials. And again, Microsoft will never email you directly for something like this where you need to sign in.
Mm.
Anything that's being sent purportedly by Microsoft and wants you to sign into your email address is going to be something phony. If there's ever something that needs to be checked, it'll be done by your IT staff. They'll go in and they'll take care of it from their end. So that's the reddest red flag
Yeah.
is anytime you're being put in your email credentials, you're almost certainly in a trap.
What are some ways to be a little bit more proactive in terms of, trying to just prevent from even getting these types of messages, if there is such a way?
So there's not a ton of ways to be proactive.
Mm.
Really, these messages come from what look to be benign addresses. Like I said, just somebody's Outlook or Gmail or something of that nature.
Yeah.
So they're going to get through a lot of the time. Now, your IT staff could crank up your spam filter a ton, but then you'd see a lot of legitimate messages not coming through.
Sure.
And it's kind of that balance. You have to find that balance with spam. We want to stop the bad stuff from coming in, but we don't want to slow down our business by having to wait and review every single email from a new client
Sure.
and whitelisted. So there's not a ton to be done proactively. As I mentioned, they will usually find your email address off of a company website or something that's publicly out there available. Or if maybe a client or a colleague has had their email breached, they're going to rip a copy of their contacts and everything. So it may have been got that way. Someone you emailed at some point in time had their email breached and their contacts copied. So unfortunately, there's not a lot that can be done proactively without, being a little overboard on the spam and blocking a lot of good messages. So again, that's why it's important to be really vigilant when you're reading your emails and in particular, any that are asking for a financial transaction or that are asking you to sign in to something.
Gotcha. So, um, so really, at the end of the day, it's you have to just sort of, this is a new age of
Yeah.
experiencing email, as you just need to be, you need to be proactive in
Mhm.
verifying what it is that you're reading.
Exactly. You just need to make sure to take a beat. And if you're ever not sure, of course, you can always forward in your email to us.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always happy to take a look and can verify things for you if you're not sure. But outside of that, yeah, you just want to take a minute before you hastily put in your credentials somewhere. You want to be sure you're putting credentials in the place you mean to. And yeah, it's just kind of the way of the world. Unfortunately, Phishers has become a more and more popular job title these days. You know, and it's just something we all have to adjust to and just kind of keep an eye out for.
Excellent. I'm trying to think of, so I guess two-factor authentication, better, good antivirus, malware protection,
Yeah.
anything else that kind of like
Yeah,
just some extra layers that will help.
yeah. So like I mentioned, antivirus will help, but for the most part with Fishers, it's about getting you to do the work and just putting.
Right.
So that won't help too much. Now, two-factor is huge because with two-factor, even if you give them your credentials, they can't sign in unless they have access to that second-factor authentication, which they never should. That should be something on your cell phone.
Yeah.
So two-factor can be a tremendous help. That will pretty much not allow them to actually log into anything, even with your username and password. So two-factor is one thing that can really stop this kind of stuff dead in its tracks, at least as far as giving up your email credentials. Now, will two-factor help if someone asks you to do a wire transfer and you do? Unfortunately not. No two-factor on that one. Maybe there is. That's something for the banks to answer. But it can definitely help if you're worried about putting your credentials in on a site. If someone will access your email and masquerade as you to get more people with two-factor authentication, there's no way that they can do it.
Right. Now, just so I understand, and I'm when I have these conversations with people that I say phishing, and usually the eyes glaze over, right? It's like, but then when I start to say, look, there are malicious people trying to get you to do something,
Mm-hmm.
and so these doings could be sending money through either a wire transfer, through gift cards. These doing somethings could be providing login credentials to your systems.
Mm-hmm.
Now that to me seems like the wire transfer thing seems like a, a huge pain. Like especially if it's a substantial amount of money, it could be crippling, right? Whereas with the login, it seems like if you can provide someone your login, that's a whole nother ball game because you're giving them access to your systems, right?
Right. I mean, you're giving them access to all of your emails. So anything company sensitive, anything you've emailed with sensitive information. If you've got any emails that maybe have corporate credit card or something on there, some kind of payment information, it's they've got it all. They've got access to all that, and it's very common for your email password and your email address to match the kind of username and password you use for other things, for other websites, for other logins. Whether it be to your computer, to VPN to get on your network. Maybe it's the same password you use to log into the bank for the company's accounts. It's very often a password that leads to multiple things, and once you put it into one of those sites and stuff, I mean, it's out there, and for a lot of people to grab and try wherever they might.
Right.
So both can do a lot of damage. It's certainly not good. And also, if someone has access to your email, maybe if there's nothing they can specifically get from you, now they've got your contacts and everything. So anybody they didn't know in the company, they do now. And they can send an email that's coming from your email server and say, hey, go ahead and sign in on this thing. I'm sending you this Dropbox. And then maybe that's how they get the CEO's information, or the CTO's information. So it kind of spreads, again, like a viral.
Right.
So
Seems like there's a whole nother level too of just unfortunate embarrassment, right? I mean, it could be embarrassment for your brand, your organization, definitely the person, like that.
Certainly.
Yeah.
If emails are coming out to your clients from you and your email's breached, and then you have to send a follow-up like, hey, please don't click that link, my account was breached, it's like, well, what else are these guys not really thinking about if they're falling for this? Or is this a company that, are we safe to provide them with payment information because their system's been breached? So having to send out an email like that's never fun and never a great look. So it can definitely hurt your brand.
So it seems like the most common thing, besides just any time you get anything suspicious, if it's from a vendor and it says, hey, your logins are weird, or if it's from your CEO and she never asks you for money, or even if she does, it's just better to pick up that phone and call.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the other seemingly fail-safe or close to fail-safe is at the very least check the sender address and really understand who it's coming from.
Absolutely. That's definitely the first. If you're like, that message doesn't look quite right, that's definitely the first place to take a look, because it's real easy to tell if you see that the return address is abxy@gmail.com, and you're like, well, that's not George in accounting. That's not his address. So that's a great first place to look, for sure. That's definitely the first great place to start.
Excellent. So pick up the phone, check the address, and then if you accidentally click on the link, really, really be sure that you're doing the right thing there. And I'm pretty sure I speak on behalf of any IT support personnel. They would much rather you, even if you did click on it, there's no harm in just saying, hey, I clicked on this. I don't think I should have. I didn't enter any information whatsoever, but man, I don't get the warm and fuzzies about this. I never get login information. You just tell me what I should be doing next.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you do put your credentials in, and then you think maybe that wasn't right, come to us and let us know, because it's very rare that you'll put this information in and then 5 minutes later it'll turn around again. So it usually takes a little bit. There's a little bit of a period. So if you let us know, pretty quickly after, like, hey, I don't think this is right, and we see that no, it wasn't, that you put your credentials into a malicious site, we go in, we change all your credentials and everything, and then that's it. They've got nothing.
Yeah.
We make sure you're not using that password on anything else, and before they've even actually looked at your information, it's already out of date, and there's nothing further they can do. So there's definitely room for, if something does go wrong, to reach out, let us know, and we're always happy to review an email, to review a site you clicked on, anything like that. We're always happy to do it.
What if an organization is like, man, we just had this phishing attack, we feel like we just got over it, and now there's another one? Are there repeat offenders? Does it happen sometimes? You're like, man, I can't shake these folks.
Yeah, definitely. So this is anecdotal, but what I've noticed is that usually, some scammers will kind of get their eye on a company and they'll just barrage it for a little while. There'll be a couple weeks where they're just sending fish after fish, especially if there was a successful one. They're going to want to try again, and they're going to keep going back to you. And if after a couple weeks they get nothing, they're going to stop and move on. That's not to say another group of fishers might not come along a month or two later. Unfortunately, it's something that's not going away. The problem is here, and it's here to stay. So you always have to kind of keep your guard up when you're reading any emails that are just out of the ordinary. But usually it'll kind of come in waves like that. You'll get a lot for a little while, and then they'll move on.
Now, what if it is the CEO example and she's like, I have to have this stop. Like, these folks need to stop sending messages that look like it's coming from me. Is there an answer to that?
So there are different levels of spam tools that can block that kind of thing.
Okay.
So if someone sends an email and they're using a spoof where they try to make it look like it's coming from your company email, where you look at the send from and it shows, tim@yourcompany.com. There are things called SPF records that are put in a DNS by your IT staff that will block anything like that. So if we see an email coming in that matches our domain, but it's not from the servers we use, it just gets stopped, period. It won't ever hit you. Now, outside of that, there are different levels of spam filters for that kind of thing, where there's certain trigger things maybe it has a list of possible triggers, and if a message meets a certain number of those, it'll block them. So you could have it say, if the name of the person matches the name of someone in your company, and the first part of their email address matches this person's email address, it's just, block it. So that can help a lot with those where it's masquerading as another part of your company. But again, those can only be sort of so effective. They don't, if the person makes it different enough, or it's just one thing, they show their name as the CEO's name, but the address is totally different. Those spam blockers are still going to let it through because it's only failing on one of those several checks. And if we crank things up enough so that one check would fail something, you'd have a lot less email coming in.
Yeah.
And then you'd have some less malicious email, but you'd have some less legit ones too. And again, that's where it's such a balance with spam. It's tough call, just because, again, if you're waiting hours and hours for some emails because it's getting caught in the spam filter, that's costing you time, that's costing you business. Definitely. So you have to find a compromise, essentially, nothing where everybody's happy, but something where you can live with it, where the really obvious egregious stuff is blocked, but this trickier stuff is unfortunately still going to come through to allow legitimate emails to come through as well.
Right. Wow. This has been extremely helpful, and I think a lot of folks will benefit from it. Definitely some great tips that I'll try to put together in some show notes for everybody. But it seems like the overarching theme here is really be careful when you get a message from someone that's requesting any type of financial request. Spend the 2 extra minutes it takes to take a real good look at it, and try not to click on anything until you go, let me just call him or her up and just go, did you send this? And if that person's not available, if they have an assistant or something, just get some verification. Some human verification really makes the difference. And that second thing is check that sending address, make sure that isn't from a Gmail, an Outlook, XYZ at vendorname.com. And then for vendor stuff, if you have an IT support specialist working with you and it comes from Microsoft, there's about a 99.9 chance that that's not legit, because it should go to their IT admin to begin with. And even if it is from a different vendor, no harm in just reaching out to your IT support specialist. Say, hey, I wasn't doing anything in this account. I just want to make sure it's legit. Maybe you can help me out, and likely they'll just reset your password for you in that specific area, and just double check everything that's going on.
Exactly. One other quick thing is when you do get those emails that ask you to log in at Dropbox or log in at DocuSign, and it launches a web page, if you look up in your URL bar, it's never actually going to be Dropbox.com or DocuSign. It's going to be some absolute nonsense. It's going to look crazy. So when you get redirected to a page and it's asking you for your email information, just look at the URL bar, and if it's not, Microsoft.com, Google.com, something, if it's anything out of the ordinary, take a beat and run it by your IT staff, or just exit on out, because that's another good way to tell. There's really no way to spoof that kind of stuff. So another good place to check if you're not sure about something.
And another way I imagine would be, if you get something from Dropbox that looks suspicious, just don't click on anything. Just go to Dropbox.com, go to, Google, Google.com, Microsoft, whatever you need to do. Just type it in yourself. Don't click on anything. You'll be prompted if there's a legit issue, right?
Exactly.
Excellent. This is great. This has been super helpful, Anthony. As always, it's a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for all the fun tips, and hopefully this will make some folks real educated on what to do when they receive that nasty gram.
Terrific. I hope so. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take it easy.